Now we're going to talk about external JavaScript. If you've worked with CSS, cascading style sheets, before, you know how it's handy to use external style sheets because one change can propagate throughout the entire site. External JavaScripts are just the same and useful for the same reason. If you're following along with the exercise files, we are in Chapter 3, Example 2, and we start off by adding a header script tag. Same as before, it's going to be script type equals text/JavaScript, again, so the browser knows that it is JavaScript that follows this, but we're going to add one more attribute, the source attribute. In this case, it's going to be set to script.js. Script.js is a file where we keep our JavaScript code. External JavaScript files should always end with a .js suffix. That tells the web server and the browser that it is JavaScript. Then we end our script tag, as always. But if you notice, this time we didn't put anything between the begin and end script tags. Everything that we want is going to be inside the script.js file. Script.js, by the way, it's in the same folder as our HTML file, so we can just refer to it as script.js. We don't have to give a path. The one other thing we add in this document is another h1 tag, same as before, but with a new attribute, or at least new to us in JavaScript. It's the ID attribute. Maybe familiar for those of you who've used cascading style sheets before. What the ID is it gives a unique name to an object on your page. And so this way you can tell JavaScript or CSS how to reference this particular thing. You can't reuse this name. It has to be unique. We're going to call it hello message. And that's all you have to put on this page, nothing inside it. So then we save that and we switch over to script.js, which is in the same folder. And it's a little bit more complex here than we've done before, but I'll walk through it now. It's really doing two things. We have a first line that says window.onload equals write message. Window.onload, we talked about the onload handler earlier when we talked about event handlers. Onload says when the web page finishes, do this thing. And this thing we want to do is we want to kick off the function called write message. We want to make it happen. Next up, we have our function write message. A function starts with the word function, and then we have the word write message, that's the name of our function, followed by our parens, followed by begin and end braces. Here is the begin, and here's the end brace. In between there is the contents of the function. In this case, it's a single line that says document.getElementById, hello message, .innerHTML equals hello world. What this means is we take our document, which is our web page, our HTML file, and we get our element by its ID, by its name that we just gave it. That's hello message. That grabs that object, which is the h1 tag. InnerHTML changes the HTML inside that h1 tag and changes it to, in this case, say, hello world. We want to make it a little bit more interesting, so we're going to call it hello world from an external JavaScript. And that way, when we see it on the web page, we'll know that it came from here and not from somewhere else. So let's try and run it. We go back to our file here, which is script.html, and we want to be sure when we try to run it that we're looking at script.html and not script.js. If you load script.js into the browser, what you'll find is you'll just see all the code you've just written. If you want to actually run that code, you have to use the HTML file. So let's look at the HTML file, and it says hello world from an external JavaScript. To recap just a little bit, here's our HTML file that has the hello world in HTML, and here's that on our web page. Here's the hello world in JavaScript that's done by an internal body script. And then finally, here's our hello world from an external JavaScript. And that is done, it's written inside this H1 here. And it happened by calling script.js here. Script.js was triggered on the onload of the web page. And then it updated that area on the page down here inside write message. And there's your first external JavaScript. Next, on to comments.